Hi friends, Father Kerry Walters here, pastor of Holy Spirit American National Catholic Church. This is another Holy Spirit moment. This one is the first in an occasional series entitled Life Lessons from the Ancients. Friends, let me ask you a question, and I promise you, in asking it of you, I'm asking it of myself as well. How strong is your strength of character? How committed are you to a set of moral values which can serve as the compass that guides you through life in all of its ups and its downs? I ask this question because the first ancient we're considering in this series is one for whom that question was uppermost. He is a 70-year-old man, snub-nosed, bow-legged, who calls himself the Athenian gadfly, who has the reputation of being a pain in the keister, so far as some people are concerned, and a wise father figure, so far as other people are concerned. This 70-year-old man in the year 399 BC finds himself standing before a jury of his peers who have charged him with crimes which, if convicted, can lead to his death. This is his opportunity to defend his lifetime of strengthening character to people who are challenging him. I'm speaking, of course, of Socrates, the father of Western philosophy. And we know about his trial through a work by his pupil Plato entitled The Apology. Apology is simply a transliteration of the Greek word apologia, which means defense. In this short work, Plato tells us what Socrates said in his own defense to his accusers. But it's really much more than a trial story, because in defending himself, what Socrates does is to give us what is, I think, in our day and time, a much needed example of integrity. Socrates is brought before the trial of 501 Athenian men. Juries were much larger in those days, and as a matter of fact, the jurors will also serve as the judges in Athenian trials. He's charged basically with two crimes: corrupting the youth and blasphemy, disbelieving in standard gods. He quickly disposes of both of these charges. They're flimsy to start with, and Socrates, with his usual cleverness, manages to show how thin they are in quick order. You can read the short dialogue for yourself in order to see exactly how Socrates responds to the two charges. More importantly for our purposes, however, what Socrates does in his defense is to argue that a good person should always examine the beliefs that he or she holds, and should also invite others to do the same to the beliefs that they hold. Because what is it that a human being really wants in this world? We want to know truth, and we want to know how to live good lives. And the only way we can achieve either of those goals is through examining ourselves and the beliefs which we walk around with and just all too often naturally assume are true. Socrates made a life career out of reflecting upon his own beliefs and asking others to reflect upon theirs. And in doing so, obviously enough, he irked people, at least some people, because you and I generally don't like to have our beliefs challenged. We want to assume that they are absolutely solid, even if we've never bothered to demonstrate to ourselves, or to other people for that matter, such solidity. Socrates says that the unexamined life is not worth living. And he's not saying that because he is a philosopher who is always curious about what lies beyond the next intellectual horizon. No, he's saying that because the examined life is the only way in which you and I can attain integrity. And by integrity, what Socrates means is that we are honest with ourselves and with others, and that we demonstrate publicly what it is that we believe privately, that there's no distance, there's no gap between our private beliefs and the way in which we comport ourselves in the world. We are integrated. The public is integrated with the private. We are whole persons. And that wholeness is achievable, once again, only if we examine ourselves and invite others to examine themselves as well. In Socrates' time, there were traveling teachers known as sophists who would go around and for a price teach rhetoric, the art of persuasion. Sophists trained young men who were interested in careers in politics or in the law, in which the art of persuasion, of course, would be quite useful. Sophists were not concerned with truth. They were not concerned with integrity, with honesty, with wholeness. What they were concerned with is making the weaker case seem the stronger. The methods, the rhetorical styles in which an individual can go about doing that. That, for Socrates, is a sad commentary on a culture, any culture, his or today ours, in which people will do everything that they can to persuade others without in any way having a regard for truth. Socrates refuses to play that game, to play the game of persuasion in order to acquire wealth or in order to acquire power. And he chides his accusers at one point in the Apology by saying this: "Are you not ashamed in your eagerness to possess as much wealth and reputation and honors as possible, while you do not care for, nor give any thought for, wisdom or truth or the best possible state of your soul?" A person of integrity is more concerned about wisdom and truth and the state of his or her soul than all of the external flipperies that Socrates just mentioned. What would we do if, like Socrates, we were asked to abandon our principles, to become hypocrites? What would we do if our very lives were threatened, if we did not forego our moral compass? Do we have the strength of character, the strength of soul, as Socrates would say, to resist that? Well, this is what he says for himself: "I will not yield to any man, contrary to what is right, for fear of death, even if I should die at once for not yielding." Now, my friends, let's face it, you and I are almost certainly never going to be challenged with death if we do not change our moral values. But we can be seduced, can't we, by the sophistry that is rampant in our own society into putting aside this value and putting aside that value for the purposes of expediency, for the sake of getting ahead. We may tell ourselves we'll return to them a little bit later on, but of course, once we begin to shed virtues, we become habituated to their absence, and it's not likely that we will indeed return to them at a more opportune time. Integrity is something that might be lost little by little by little, a slow erosion, a slow attrition, if we're not terribly careful. This is what Socrates teaches us in the Apology. This is what this man who lived so long ago still can share with us across the centuries. This is a life lesson from the ancients. At the end of the trial, Socrates is condemned to death. And he says to his jurors two things. He says, "Do me this favor at any rate. I have sons. When they grow to manhood, if they do not examine themselves, if they do not pursue wisdom and truth and goodness of soul, if they are fixated upon pursuing wealth and power at the expense of truth and wisdom, then chide them as I have chided you. Tease them as I, the Athenian gadfly, have teased you." And then he says in closing, I go now to death and you go to life. Only the gods know which is the better fate. But in point of fact, the better fate in this circumstance is Socrates, because he has retained his strength of soul. He has retained integrity, and as a consequence is an inspiration to you and me today, all these many centuries later. Friends, I'm Father Carey, and this has been a Holy Spirit moment, offering you a life lesson from the ancients, Socrates, on integrity. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.